Okay, I'm so sorry. It's working now. Been waiting for a long time. I apologize. Let me just make sure we did the Shulchan Aruch. We were doing Vav. Yeah, we did it. Okay, so we're gonna go design. So it says here, Katav Rashba, Shenishar Misha Berech ala Boser, Shechianu. So he was asked, right? Somebody who blessed Shechianu on Boser. So what is Boser? Boser means that it's unripe fruit. Can he still bless on something else, grapes, normal fruit? מסתבר שהעיקר הם הענבים שאין הכל הולך אלא אחר שבח הפרי. So says the Rashba that it makes sense to say that the main thing over there is the grapes, because doesn't not everything goes according to the quality of the fruit. V'gamro and its ripeness. Sheim lav ken yivarech ala netz. So then he says that because if not so, he could have blessed on, just some kind of a little like shoot, that came out of the tree, the bud, whatever. And then on the boser, when it becomes unripe fruit, and then bless again when they become grapes. And then also on the wine. So you're going to get 4 stages over there, 4 blessings like that, right? So that would be, nonsense, right? Total lunacy to say something like that. So he says, therefore, the proper thing to say is that we shouldn't bless on the unripe fruits, as we mentioned yesterday. Right? Until the point where, it's become like ripened. So it says same thing also with every fruit, same idea. After they finished it, in other words, it has to be ripe after it's finished. Ubrachot elu shel reshuten. So he says these blessings are optional; they're not really obligation to bless these things. Lo shel chova, right? Ulfichach says. Therefore, he says, "Dai mibarech al gemar pri adkan." It's enough just that he should bless on the right, the complete fruit, right, fully grown. Then he moves on. But Yosef, V'da shebesot perek bechol me'arvin. So he says you should know that at the end of this perek, Garcinan Amar Rabba. So it says there, right, that Rabba said, Ki havina be Rab Huna. When I was in the house of Rab Huna, Ibaya Mahu, we asked, right, what's a din? Lomar Zman Berosh Hashanah. Oh, to say, right, yeah, we spoke about that. To say, Shechianu on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and also Yom Kippur. Ki Atai Be Rab Yuda, says when it came to the house of Rab Yuda, Amar Ana Ekra Chadata Kamina, Akra Chadamina. So he says that Rabbi Yehuda answers him, I say it on one verse, right? We'll see what that means. Zaman says, I do it on right. Oh, okay, I see it. Right, I didn't say it right. What he means to say is I bless Shechianu on the new the new pumpkin, right? Crop. I say Shechianu on that. Amale Rashut Ka mi Baali Kika mi Baali Chova. So he answers him, this rabbi, I'm not asking about something which is optional, I'm asking about something which is obligation. My mashma mehatam shebirkat shechianu al pri amitchadesh eno chova. Right, so he says that the blessing of shechianu on fruit, right, new fruit, is not an obligation. Ela reshut, it's only optional, as we said. Like it says in the name of the Rashba. So that's where the Rashba gets this idea from, that it's not really an obligation. So if that's the case, if he didn't bless, right, he doesn't really have a sin or something like that. And also another thing, which is that you really shouldn't bless unless you're sure, because it's not even an obligation at all to do shechianu on these new fruits. Okay, great. So let's go to Shulchan Aruch. So it says Shulchan Aruch like this. You don't bless, right, shechianu on unripe fruits. We spoke about that yesterday as well. So when do you bless, right? So the truth is, here, when he says unripe fruits, you might be asking the question, didn't we learn this yesterday? So why are we learning it again? Same thing, right? So here he's talking about grapes, which has its own dynamics. So in other words, he's telling you don't bless on unripe grapes. Um, so what do you have to do? Wait until it's a complete growth. The whole pri it's the same thing also applies to any other fruit, as we said right yesterday. So it's the same thing for every fruit, basically. So if that's the case, that it's the same thing with every fruit, why did they need to mention here, grapes by itself, in like its own category? What's the idea with that? So apparently, right, grapes, as we said, right, has its own dynamics. So what does that mean? That it could be, that the way it was in those days, they used to eat those young grapes, unripe grapes. They had, whatever. So, but nevertheless, right, we don't bless on it. So let me see here what it says in the Mishnah Berurah. Yeah, so he explains it, just like yesterday, all the stuff we learned yesterday. But he brings here also another interesting thing is that it's brought down in later authorities. He says in the name of the Yerushalmi that it's a mitzvah to eat, each fruit, like when each new fruit to taste it. So why is that? To show, right, that he appreciates that Hashem, made all these fruits. It's a form of appreciation, so you can bless on it. Sounds good to me. Again, right, as we said, it's not an obligation, all this stuff, but he says it's a mitzvah, meaning what, it's optional. Okay, great. So let's move on. So we'll go to Tet and Tet. So these are really funny ones. These are blessings, some of them that you can make when you go to the zoo. And I'll explain to you, right, what I mean by that. Yeah, so the truth is, that the zoo thing, yeah, it's in this halacha, but a little bit later on. Anyway, let's see the Tur Bet Yosef. So it says, "Haroeh takushi agichol." Right, so it says, right, that you saw a person who's a kushi, right? So what's a kushi? It's like a black guy, African, African native, right? One of those guys, right? The gichor, right? So gichor is a different type of differentiation, right, in the pigment of the skin. So what is it? It's like a person who, if I'm not mistaken, he's like very heavily freckled, So his face is like very red, right? Something like that. So there's all kinds of things like that. So what do you bless on these things, right? Mishaneh habriot. Right? He makes various types of creations. Right. So what does that mean, various types? Because they look different than most other people. That's what they have a different appearance. So you bless on that. You bless Hashem for that. That He made a nice variety of peoples in the world. Whatever, right? You know, all the various races of the world. Okay, so let's go on. So he brings a source for this, right? Ad sofa siman hakoba per karoe, right? Where is it coming from? All this in the Gemara, right? Nuchet Amud Bet, which is from the Brachot. Then he goes on, Beshima Ravad. So you know what I'll do? I'll read it inside the Tur. This way we can get the whole context here. So let's see the Tur. What does he say? Right. So it says like this. Haraweh Kushi, right? If he sees a Kushi, the Gicho, right? As we said, this guy's a red guy kind of thing. Shehu Adom, right? He's red. That's what he said. Harbe is very red. Vea Lavkan, Shehu Lavan Harbe, right? So then we have the Lavkan. So what is a Lavkan? It's like an albino, super white. Shehu Lavan Harbe, he is very white. The end, Veta Kapach, right? So what is a Kapach? Who should be tno gadol. He has like a very protruding stomach, one of these guys. And מתוך עוביו נראית קומתו מקופחת. So, in other words, he's so his stomach is so big that he looks like he lacks height. It's kind of like a ball, kind of shaped like a ball. I guess that's the idea. So then he says ve'ananas ve'adrikonas. So nanas, right, means like a midget. And right then this guy adrikons ve'adrakonas ve'hu shemale balet upatuy harosh shekol שערותיו דבוקות זה בזה. So there's also a person who's like full of yavelet, right, which is like warts, and then you have a person like his hair is stuck together. So all kinds of differentiations in humanity. Right? Now, okay, now we finish with the people, right? Now we're talking about animals. So which animals do you bless on? Right? The right? The elephant and the monkey. Right? So what's the blessing for all these? Right? What does that mean? He changes, right, makes them various types of creations. In the old days, and when we were living in Jerusalem, so we would take the kids, right, on Chol HaMoed, sometimes to the zoo, and what do you call it? So what we would do is make these blessings there, because we would see the monkey and we would see the elephant. There's like a big zoo in Jerusalem there, So yeah, we would go there for the blessings, whatever. The kids would have fun, with that stuff. Okay, so whatever, right? I'll tell you guys something really funny, So what happened was that it was a very common thing. Like, the parents would take the kids to the zoo, in Chol HaMoed, to entertain them a little bit, whatever, right? So then, right, one day, this was already like after I think I stopped going to the zoo, whatever. So one day, my Rabbi Maran, he says, in the shiur, in the lecture of Chol HaMoed, he says, where are you going this Chol HaMoed? He used to tell us, right, like this. You're going to the zoo again? He says, like, haven't you had enough of the zoo already? You've been there already, like, several times. Like, quit the zoo already. So, why would he say that, to quit the zoo? Because, it should be learning Torah on Chol HaMoed. That's really what a person should be doing, So when he's too busy with the zoo, that's taking too much time. That's what he was trying to say. Good point. You guys have seen, I posted about that already. This, like every Chol HaMoed, I post about that issue of like what activity a person should do during Chol HaMoed, whatever. Okay, so you'll get it over there. Then he brings another, set of categories here, that we bless on. So he says, what about a chiger, right? So chiger is somebody who is crippled. Ve'akiter, right? And somebody who's amputated. Ve'asomer, somebody who's blind. Umukesh shchin, right? He has shchin, right? Which is, boils or something, whatever it is. He's got boils. Ve'abo hakinin, right? As we said, so bo hakanin is a guy, right, who has freckles, So the first guy was like a red guy, he's a red. This guy's a freckled guy, a little bit different. Variation. והוא שמנומר בנקודות, right? דקות. אם הם ממאי מו, so he said, now these categories depends on if he was born that way, right? So if he was born that way, you bless Mishaneh Briot, same blessing. ואם נשתנו אחר כך, but if they change afterwards, מברך דיין האמת, right? Then we bless the true judge, right? So why is that? Because, Hashem judged him and changed his appearance after he was born. Okay? So then he continues, Rabbi, right? It says, Rabbi says, Dafka Misha mitzta'er alav, tumiyat debriot tovot. So he says this only applies, to make these blessings if the person, has he's upset about how they look. In other words, he's kind of like in shock, kind of like shocks him. So he's kind of like disturbed by it, disturbs him. So then, so he says it's similar to what we said, right, regarding various creations. That we said, right, that you bless when a person has some benefit from it. Uh, The Katab Od, he writes further up more that Ve'eno mevarech ela pam rishona. He says you only bless the first time when you see this guy, right? Whatever. Shashinui alav gadol meod. Why? Because it really feels like very unusual at that point. But once you've already seen him several times, you get used to it, so it's no big deal anymore. That's what he's trying to say, In other words, the shock factor is gone already. Okay, great. So לפי מה שכתבתי למעלה, מברך אחד מ-30 יום. But he says, according to what I wrote before, regarding the other blessings, right, this would also be a 30-day rule, So in other words, he doesn't agree with this thing. You should only bless once. You can bless every 30 days, just like all the other blessings we mentioned. Okay, great. Let's go to Shulchan Aruch. Okay. So it says here, Haroeh Kushi, right? If he sees a Kushi, right, African guy, Begichor. So this guy's like red, Daino Shehu Adom Arbe, he's very red. Redneck, he's a redneck. Oh, they are Lavkan, right? And also Lavkan. Dainu Shehu Lavan Arbe, that's he's an albino. They're tapach, right? So what is that? As we said, right? That he looks like a ball. He's got like a big stomach, so it looks like he looks like he's just a one big ball. Can't really notice his height, because he looks round. Okay. Then he goes on. Then he says, "Ve'ananas darkona," and then we have the midget, right? And we have the darkona. So what is that? He's full of warts, whatever, right? Or his hair is stuck one to the other. Right? And then we talked about the elephant, the kof, and the monkey, right? So all these things, right, which are like very unusual kinds of creations that have an unusual appearance, whatever. So what's the blessing you bless on them? Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam mishaneh habriot. That he changes the creatures. Okay, that's the end of that. There's also, by the way, on these things, there's also a midrash that describes it, in a little bit of a different manner, a different light. Well, the Midrash brings it from a historical perspective, right? So what does that mean? That when we have the door of the dispersion, right, where they built the tower, and they were dispersed by Hashem. They tried to build a tower against God, all kinds of straight crazy stuff like that. So what happened was that when God came down, to see what they were doing, trying to rebel against Him. So what He did was He changed some of them, of these people, and He made them into monkeys and elephants. So this is the reason why we say Mishanei Briot, right? He changed the creatures because He changed them, into monkeys and elephants at that time when this whole issue happened there. This is what happened. So according to that, right, this is the reason why we bless this blessing. That He changes the right the creatures, the creations. So as we said, right, there's two animals that we bless on that. We bless on the elephant and the monkey. So according to the simple meaning, why dafka on those two? Because they look different than the other animals. They're like very unique looking, unusual. Why the elephant? Because it has that trunk. So it makes it like really look strange. That trunk. And same thing with the monkey. Monkey is like a strange looking animal. It has some like human characteristics. It's like it's a little strange, right? Unusual something there. Okay, great. So that's about it. We'll go to the next one, Tet. So here he talks about what we already mentioned, right? The person sees somebody who's crippled, right, or amputated, right? Also somebody who's blind. Mukeshkin, right? Afflicted with boils. The bakanin, right? A lot of freckles, right? So all these things, if they were born that way, what do you bless? Mishanei Abriot, right? Again, he makes different types of creatures, right? Different unique creatures. But if he changed after he was born into that, then he blesses Dynamet. So as we said, right, this blessing is telling you that he's a true judge. So what does that mean? He judge these people to change them, the way they look today. So it's judgment. It's all judgment there. All right, sounds good to me. ויש מי שאומר, דווקא על מי שמצטער עליו. Right, and then he brings the other opinion that we saw in Bet Yosef, right, which was the Ravad. So what did the Ravad say? You should only bless, right, if you like feel, right, if you feel sad about this, the way they look, the shock, you're in shock, kind of. אבל על עכו"ם אינו מברך. So he says, therefore, according to that, you wouldn't bless on a goy, right? So why is that? Because the goy doesn't really shock you so much, doesn't bother you so much, like your own people, right? You love them, whatever. Okay, so he says, "Ve'eno mevarech עליו פעם ראשונה, שהשינוי עליו גדול מאוד." So he says, you only bless, as we said, right, that the first time you see them, because that's when you're really shocked, at the way they look. Right, and then Rama brings the other opinion. Mishloshim yom, shloshim yom. Right, but some say it's 30 days. Right, same as the other ones. So we already said in Bet Yosef, right, that the halacha is that we go like the 30-day rule. We don't go like this opinion. So there you go, the 30-day rule. Let me just see what the Mishnah Berurah here says. Interested. Okay, so he brings here, several ways of looking at this, various opinions here. But bottom line is, as we said, right, that as we said, there's a machloket here. So what is the machloket? According to the first opinion, you're supposed to bless like in every case, of these instances that we mentioned, right? As long as you apply the 30-day rule, right, as we said before. But according to the other opinion here, which is the Ravad, you should only bless, once in a lifetime, so, because of the shock factor, and also, right, he says that it has to be that you feel sad about it, you're distressed by it. Okay, whatever, it's all good. So, as we said, right, the halacha is like the first opinion, and the reason being is that the second opinion, is minority opinion, single opinion. So yeah, we're not going to go like that. Okay, great. It's also stam beyesh, which is the general right format of the Shulchan Aruch. So we go when we have stam beyesh, you go like the stam. Okay, I won't get into that because I already explained it a couple of times, so I'll just leave it. So let's go to Yud. I think this is the last one in the chapter. Let's see what we can do here. So it says in Yud, it's very short. It says, Afilu goy or behema, right? It says, even a goy or an animal. So meaning what? It's the same with them. Same rules apply as with the Jews. Kachu Yushami, right? That's what it says in Yushami. Afilu para na'a Oh, okay. I'm saying, you know what? We gotta see the Torah inside because it's missing some context here. Gotta see the whole thing. So it says the Torah like this. Ra'a beriot tavot or behema beinanot tavot. So what about if he sees, right? This is an interesting one, by the way. What is it talking about here? We're talking about you saw something, creation of God, which looks, beautiful. So what does that mean? Let's say just a beautiful human being, right? A human being who looks like, dynamite, right? They look incredible. Very impressive looking person. That's one thing. And same thing also with animals as well, right? If you see an animal which looks impressive, some of them are just like very, good looking animals, But and then, like for instance, sometimes the horses, can be very beautiful. You see like a beautiful horse. It looks like amazing, stunning. I guess that would be a good example, right? So whatever it is, right? So same thing also applies to trees. You see a beautiful tree. So that could all the more so, right? If you see like a beautiful, herbage, right? Some beautiful forest, some beautiful meadow, right? It just looks gorgeous, or a beautiful orchard, beautiful garden, things like this, right? That's definitely in this category, right? That we mentioned here. So fine. So what do you bless on that? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shekacha lo be'olamo. You say, right, that Blessed is God that's the way it is in his world. In other words, that's the way he has it in this world, you know? In other words, he made some beautiful creations, God. He fashioned some beautiful things in this world. So as we said, right, whether it's humans or animals or just nature, right, things like that. That's the thing, the land of Israel, is so beautiful. You have to bless this blessing like almost every day when you go, because you see such beautiful landscape there. It's like unbelievable. It's like, oh my God, this is gorgeous. It puts Switzerland to shame, what you see in Eretz Israel. It's incredible. But it's funny, like one time I remember, like, 15 years ago, whatever it was, I came here to America. I was living in Jerusalem at that time. Came here to America, because I was publishing my book, and I need to raise some money, to publish it, whatever. So I went to some donor, right, who agreed, to meet me, and he was living in Jersey, like Deal, New Jersey, the Syrian community. One of the big shot rabbis there, I'm not going to mention his name, right? I don't want to give him too much business. So anyway, right. So anyway, we made an appointment to go see him. So I rented a car because I was here. I didn't have a car, and I drove down there. I don't know, 2 hour drive, whatever, hour and a half, whatever. So New Jersey, by the way, you know what they call it, right? They call it the Garden State. So each state has its own name, right? You guys know, right? The Lone Star State, right? The Sunshine State. You guys know. So New Jersey is called the Garden State. And then, when I drove down there, I realized why. Because the nature in New Jersey, the meadows there, the forests are so stunningly beautiful. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God. So I was thinking, I should make this blessing. I think I did. If I remember correct, I made the blessing. I was like, wow, this nature is just too beautiful. I have to bless on this. My God, it looks like paradise over here. So okay, you get the point, right? So we're talking about things like that. There's a road over there, called the Garden State Parkway, in New Jersey. That's exactly what I was driving on, the Garden State. There was that's then I realized why they call it that, I was like, oh, okay, now I know. Garden State Parkway. Okay, whatever, it's all good. So that's what you do. You bless on all these things. So here also, right, Gam Bezei says, Katav Rabbad. Here also the Rabbad said, right, only one time you bless. Not more than that. And not on others, right? Unless you saw something more beautiful than that, right? So, if the second one upstaged the first one. Okay, that's the end of the tour. So we'll do Bet Yosef Shulchan Aruch, and I guess we'll stop there. Finish the chapter here. So he brings a source for this, right? In the Bet Yosef, Kakub Yerushalmi, right? It comes to Yerushalmi, all this good stuff here. So what does it say in Yerushalmi, right? Just a afilu goy or behema. It says there that even if it's a goy or an animal, right, you bless on that too. So let's say the beautiful, the person, right, is a goy. It doesn't matter. You have to bless on that. Even on a beautiful goy. So he says it comes in Yerushalmi. So it says there that if you see like a beautiful cow or a beautiful donkey, right, you bless on that too. Oh, wow. I don't think I've ever seen a beautiful donkey in my life. That's something unusual. Okay, so we'll go to Shulchan Aruch and we're done. So it says here, now, right? If you see, right, beautiful trees, or beautiful, people, right, or just, animals, afilu akum, even if it's a goy or animal. Omer, what's the blessing you say? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shekacha lo be'olamo. Right, you blessing, right? Blessed are you, Hashem. That's the way it is. That's the way it is in your world, in His world, right? In His world, that's the way He has it. Such beauty, right? Such stunning, right, beauty there. So it says here also, right? You bless only the first time. Not more. Not on them and on the others, unless they're more beautiful than those. Wow. So here, in other words, he seems to go like the Ravad because of the doubt, right? Not to make a blessing in vain. So if that's the case, right? We should go like probably the Ravad also in the other case, right? The case before as well. So what does that mean? Only one time. Unless the second one upstaged the first one, as we said, right? So I'll tell you guys something, interesting, right? One time, one rabbi asked a good question about this halakha, which is that how is it, right, that a person can bless on a beautiful goy? So you see what the question is here? In other words, if you're talking about a Jewish man, so he sees a beautiful goyish woman, he's supposed to bless on that, right? But the question is, right? But isn't it forbidden to look at a goyish woman? How can you bless if you're not even allowed to look at her? So you guys have an answer for me, or should I try to make it myself? Okay. So the answer is like this, right? That it's brought down, in the some places, some books. That the answer is like this: that yeah, it's true. You're not allowed to look really, at a goya, to see how beautiful she is. But we're talking about here. You saw her by chance. Let's like you're walking in the street, right? And she just like walked by you, so you saw her, not because you're trying to look at her, just like by chance, you caught a glimpse at her. So you bless, that's what it means. You understand? You saw her by chance. But to look at her on purpose, to gaze at her, what I mean, to enjoy her beauty, this you're not allowed to do. So what does that mean? If you see like a beautiful goya, as a man I'm talking about, right? You see a beautiful goya, you saw her already, So what's gonna be? You're gonna make the blessing and look away because you're not allowed to stare at her. You can't really enjoy it too much, So now, right? What about if you see a goyish man, right? Which is it's not like a woman, so it's not so bad. But the truth is, the Talmud says. It says that you really shouldn't look at a goy either. The face of a goy, because it has a bad influence on people. There's a bad influence that comes from them. You're not supposed to look at their face. So if that's the case, how did you do it? How did you see him? And so the same answer, right? Just happened to walk by you, so you saw him. Not because you're trying to gaze at the guy, or stare at him, because you're not supposed to do that really. So. Same thing, that you just happen to see him, and you bless, and then you look away. You shouldn't really be gazing at a goy, it's not proper to do that. Okay, so thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Chazak u'baruch, Chag Sameach, B'ezrat Hashem, and we will see you next time, right? Which is going to be on Sunday's a holiday, right? So we'll see you Monday, B'ezrat Hashem.
Chag Sameach.
Have a great holiday, and B'ezrat Hashem, hope you enjoy it.